Hi everyone. I'm Jim Ghadbane. I'm president and CEO of Canarie, as it says on the chart. Earlier this summer, I had in my mind that I would be at the summit in person. It was, a stretch goal that we would start to return back to actually normal, whatever the new normal is. And unfortunately, why I'm here. Actually, the silver lining was I booked my entire week to be at Cyber. So as a result, I don't have a lot of, or at the Cyber Summit, but I don't have a lot of meetings. So that's a good thing. We also imagined that we would be back in our office. I can share with you that we have decided to open up our offices starting tomorrow. So today is officially our last work from home day, but we know that might change in the future. This is a presentation that I have never done before, and it's been done by some of the sharp people at Canarie, and I certainly hope that I do it justice, and it delivers what we believe is a very important message in terms of how we need to think about what's happening around us in terms of the ongoing threat. But no good talk at an IT summit is started with just a simple statement about IT. In fact, it's probably best to have an introduction to political philosophy and talk about the theories of the state. Now, if one thinks about the creation of the state, I'll talk a bit on a subsequent charter in terms of how states are being defined. But if we think about the creation of states, we can think back to days where we were hunter-gatherer beings, and eventually somebody discovered that we could farm. So you decide that you want to start farming, and then what happens? You grow enough things to look after your family, and then the hunter-gatherers are walking by and they see your beautiful ripe strawberries or whatever else you're planting, and they start to take them. So what do? You expand the farm a little bit, and you start to employ people to protect your farm from these hunter-gatherers. And then as your clan grows, the need for the farm grows, and the need for the amount of resources you need to support your clan continues to grow. And what happens? You start to butt up against other clans, and then we get into these situations of strife, right? So this starts like way back, maybe 8,000 years ago with the advent of farming. But you have to go then back to 1651. There's a book called Leviathan. Well, actually, that's the short form of the name. It's also called The Matter, Form, and Power of a Commonwealth, Ecclesiastical and Civil, written by Thomas Hobbes, this handsome-looking guy with a beautiful mustache, although I don't have the little thing underneath that he has under his chin. And what that posited was that life as an individual is quite dangerous, and that we would be better off to band ourselves and pull together to create societies where we could pool the resources and lead ultimately less dangerous lives. And this ended a situation that was characterized as war against all. We were basically, where's my Sears scarf? Oh, I finally can see the chat here. I don't know where my Sears scarf is. It's somewhere. I wore it all last winter. Anyway, back to my regularly scheduled talk. If you have slides, we aren't seeing them. What? Oh, you're right. I thought I'm going to thank you for oh, geez, I'll pick veil here. Hang on. I've got slides here. And this is the guy that I was referring to, this handsome guy, Thomas Hobbes with a mustache. Hopefully you can see that. Thank you. Okay, better. So it essentially declared that by pooling together, it would end the war against all, where every person or every clan was a war on everyone else. But that started a conflict of other interactions among societies. And mainly this was driven, and it actually continues to persist to this day, that we have no overarching kind of authority that oversees the entire globe, right? So countries form coalitions, that we have this thing called the United Nations that tries to work to get to common issues and peace and all these other things, but it's not through any sort of formalized structure other than goodwill. And then if you continue, and I think I'll try to continue, we come to the a time at the formal event is called the Peace of Westphalia, which ended a 30-year war, 30 years in 1648. And that sort of was a demarcation of what started what we currently call the modern era, where we have well-defined international boundaries, because prior to that it was quite fluid. You could move anywhere, you didn't really think, and now the notion of formalized states and started to take hold, and additionally, states were given sovereignty. And what that meant was within a state could organize itself any way it felt made sense for the state. That's why we continue to have various forms of governments. But it also gave the states the right to defend themselves. And it has led us to things like this in terms of not only defense, but attack, right? So this thing is, for those of you who are not jet buffs, and I'm certainly not one, but I looked it up. It's a Lockheed Martin F-22 stealth airplane. It has an estimated unit cost of $334 million per unit, which includes $150 million recoup of research and development. It also has a fairly significant and fairly impressive armament, right? So not only does this thing go out and figure out what's going on, but it can also unleash some serious destruction. In fact, it's pretty safe to call it a weapon of mass destruction, which just tangentially, I've always wondered if anyone was actually working on, weapons of limited destruction, or whether weapons of mass destruction were the only thing you would actually want to develop. And that represents the kind of the state and the art in terms of classical warfare. And because borders not only start at the ground, but they also go up vertically, we deem they've entered our border when they come into our airspace. We can build detection systems for things like this. We can put up a radar, and we can have other early warning systems that will allow us to know whether they're about to cross into our airspace. But what happens when we can't see them? What happens when they're coming in over a tiny little fiber optic and you can't tell which are the photons or which are the stealth bombers? As you can sort of see, some things are email and some things are music, but other things are coming along that same pathway, and you're not really sure that it's happening. And worse, what about if you only know about them after the fact? There's a lot of work going on in terms of predictive ability to determine threats along these pathways, but we're still sort of playing catch up. We're still waiting until they arrive before we actually do something about it. And I regret to tell you that they're already here. We just don't know where they are. We don't know what damage they're doing. But I would characterize this threat, as opposed to a weapon of mass destruction, I would call it a weapon of specific destruction. And it might seem odd to use the term destruction, but in reality, what's happening, right? These cybersecurity threats on things that the state operates, like our water supply or electricity, erode our ability to operate as a society in a manner of our own choosing. And that has the risk of destroying a lot of the values we have within any given society, I mean, we can posit that the Canadian values are the best, and we would all want to believe that. But other countries would have a similar sort of pride, and in a construct where we're not aware that this is happening, and we can't trust whether the next power outage, that it has nothing to do other than a lightning storm, but it actually, if we start to get our heads around the fact that they may have actually put us back to a time without electricity, there's a lot of specificity in that. And I like to think about strategies for dealing with that in the future. And so we really need to start to the dialogue that we're having within the country around what do we need to do to continue to protect our own sovereignty, as well as the values that we've come to know and enjoy being in this part of the land. I didn't recognize the person that was speaking before me. I can tell him where Fernie is, but Canada is such an amazing place, and like, how did we get so lucky to get this place? So, as I mentioned, it's already happening. There was clearly, for the whole COVID-19, there was a lot of research that went in, and a small highlight that I can share with you around that research was through the power of supercomputers. There was the ability to reduce the possibilities in terms of, the vaccine rather, from 77,000 different possible combinations of sequencing a vaccine, and down to approximately 70. So it went from 77,000 possible candidates to 70 in the course of 1 week. 1 week of a supercomputer did a lot of the crunching on this. And so if you're a researcher in this, you want to have some confidence that the data you're looking at is secure. You want to have a lot of confidence that the results that it's giving you are meaningful, because lives matter. Lives are dependent on it, and lives matter. So the research community was really concerned, and continues to be concerned, not only of the stealing ideas, but corrupting the data that they were actually using. This is a picture of a gentleman named Scott Jones, the former president of the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity. I've met him a number of times. Very, very compelling speaker. Talks about the need for the government of Canada to protect ourselves against the 4 countries. He names them in this article. It's no longer news, but the four countries that he names. In fact, we're coming on almost the first year anniversary of this article. He names 4 state actors. He names 4 state actors. The first is China. The second is Russia. The third is North Korea, and the fourth is Iran. Now, some of you would have heard about the SolarWinds attack on the U.S. government. So think about that. Russia managed to infiltrate the U.S. government. I mean, okay, so the U.S. government, maybe they don't know the first thing about cybersecurity. I would say they know quite a bit about cybersecurity. In fact, remember the cost of that jet? Hundreds of millions of dollars. It's my understanding that to infiltrate the U.S. government took about 100 engineers to work on this problem at a fairly modest cost. I don't know what salaries are of engineers in Russia, but one would imagine it's in the millions of dollars, not the hundreds of millions of dollars, if that. And it's a fairly sophisticated threat. If you want to know more about it, maybe we can chat about it during in one of the breakout rooms. But I advise you, if you can, go read up online to figure out how sophisticated that threat was. That actually that attack was on the U.S. Government. And so this is a real and present danger. To put it into perspective in terms of warfare and defense, these are they're not to scale, right? I mean, that $2 billion in the top right is definitely not 100 times smaller than the $264 billion being spent on by those 4 countries in terms of their defense spend. And so if you take the largest university in the country, that's their budget, right? That's the University of Toronto, 2.7 billion a year, and you compare that to just the defense spend by these countries, you start to realize that we have a bit of a problem in that we can't be figuring this out one person at a time. We are definitely not dealing with the magnitude of this adversary individually and expecting success. We have to really start to think about other ways of working on this. One approach, and you can sort of imagine like the total opposite approach of dealing with a jet would be just to say to everybody, look, you know what, we're not going to form a centralized defense system. Everybody get a gun. And the gentleman in the picture there with the rifle, you know, your job is to shoot down these planes, and these other people are their jobs are to deal with hand-to-hand combat or armies that come in. I mean, does anybody really think that's a really compelling way to protect ourselves and protect the country? I certainly don't believe that. Another approach is to find a way to come and work together and become much stronger. But that's a key step, right? So we all have to agree that this is such a massive threat, and the magnitude of the adversaries are such that no single part of the country can defend itself. We have to think about other ways of working together. And it's even more critically important by the fact that we can't actually know where to look. So we need as many people looking in the various different perspectives, and then coming up with really good modalities in terms of thinking and working, as well as procedures, and also supporting each other through this entire situation until we hopefully get to a time where, like every other defense system, we have enough early warnings about what's happening to preclude any kind of attack on our ongoing livelihood. So when I talk about working together, I'll start with this is the Canadian version of portion of the Global Research and Education Network. So together with our partners in the prairies, Cyber, MRNet, and SRNet, we form Canada's National Research and Education Network, and those dots on the chart were actually all the institutions connected within Canada. And I'm proud to say that Canada was the first international country to get all their institutions on the global map, right? So this is a project that was undertaken by the Canadian NREN to sort of not only show the value of the connectivity, but also to work to convince our international partners to jump on this map. But it's diverse. We have a huge reach in the country, and that reach is both an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that we can see what's happening in various parts of the country. The disadvantage is obviously the space, the time, and the travel time to get around the country. It's a very big, massive country. The best way to describe Canada in terms of population density is like in some, right? I think there's parts of Canada that define the population density as 0.0 people per square kilometer. So, you know, we have to find some code versus code. I like that. Yeah, I like the spy versus spy. So we got to find a ways to work together. And it's also important not just to work together, but to recognize that we're all in this together. This should matter to every one of us. But it's not just about IT. Somebody put in the chat, you know, does academic freedom get in the way? Well, it can if people see that making things more secure is impinging on their academic freedom. But I can't connect those dots. But this wouldn't be the first time I was puzzled by an assertion that was made like that. I think not having it actually hinders our academic freedom because it affects all our freedoms. And so it's important not just to bring the IT people into the dialogue, but we also have to bring in the students, the researchers, the faculties, the private sector, government. I mean, if you think about what's at stake here, we've got to find a way to include this to everyone in the dialogue. I would say one of the key things that is truly getting in our way, though, is our mindset, right? The mindset that suggests that we know more about something that other people know. We understand the context better than anyone else, and therefore, like, we have to sort of defer to the other people, have to defer to what we're thinking. Or worse, it's not something that's ever going to affect me. I mean, I think the only way you can make that assertion is if you disconnected every computer you had from the internet. Then you might make the assertion that it's not going to affect you until you decide to do that and get off the grid. You're at risk, and there's really no opportunity for glory here. There really isn't. Because the end state is what we started the talk with. The end state is a version of normal where nothing really untoward is happening towards us. How do you get credit for something that isn't happening? That we're living in a world where we can trust our infrastructure, where we can trust our systems, where we can trust the data that's being shared with us. And so what do we have to do to shift this mindset? We have to all agree that we can learn from one another, that none of us is smart enough to have solved every dimension of this. We really need to think about, what are other people doing? What are they seeing? What can we learn from them, and what can we give them back? We can also share the threats that we're seeing with others. There's this general concern that if I tell people that I'm hacked, I might risk my reputation. My answer to that is get over it, right? Because it's not a matter of if you get hacked, it's really a question of when. And so that in itself will normalize any thought about reputational risk. So we get past the mindset that says we can't really share this, it's too embarrassing to talk about. We can also do a much better job of identifying what our community needs. We can start to work collaboratively with them to better understand the context they do have, and understand what makes a difference in the short term and what doesn't make a difference in the short term, as well as where should we be making our investments, and so that we're addressing the things that might be happening in the medium to longer term. So that can't happen without an ongoing dialogue with the people we are trying to serve, in a context that says, if you talk to Scott Jones or CCCS or public safety, their mission is to try to secure the country. And so we look at it and say, well, underneath that umbrella, our job is to help secure the sector that we're part of, which is the higher ed sector. And so the better we can understand how that's the needs of that sector, the better we can support them. And then the last reason to sort of get together is it provides a common voice to enlist support from other agencies or possibly funders, so that if we have a cohesive message to give them, it'll be the same that we'll be sharing with people across the country. Because if we want to truly have a country approach, we all have to understand how our part fits into that. And if we can come together to have that common level of understanding, it opens up the door for further partnerships with other entities, and hopefully funding. And then lastly, the closing comment is we really do have the ability to create a more secure Canada. There's a lot at stake here. It's my view that the triple play that we have in front of us, the opportunity is to secure the sector to the greatest extent we can, while at the same time spurring research in new ways to protect ourselves, things that might be a lot more predictive as opposed to reactive. And then the third pillar would be to find ways of commercializing some of these new novel ideas that continues to generate the GDP growth that's going to create this this virtuous circle within the country and have us the most secure, but also the most economically viable. So with that, I think I have some time for some questions.
Hey, Jim, I'll join you on here for a minute. As you mentioned, if anyone has any questions, you can throw them into the chat channel or the Q&A. So are we all going to get hacked then? What does the NREN look like in 10 years' time, Jim, in terms of security and what we're trying to protect ourselves against?
So I think that what the NREN needs to start to look at is that's a great question, Megan. Like there's a lot of emerging work going into better network architectures that are predicated on different philosophies. For those of us who spent time back in the day developing networking technology, a lot of it was predicated on the notion of trust. Like, why would the other person on the end of this link not be who they say they are? There are new network architectures that are being sort of developed that say, let's actually not presume that the trust. Let's move to a more of a zero trust network architecture. So we can do that. But also I think the NREN itself represents a great place to pool resources. The strategy that we have to undertake is to find talent wherever it is, but also find ways of pooling that talent so that they can learn and grow from each other, and then offer the most intimate support and response to the institutions that are relying on the NREN. So there's a technology play, there's a people play, and then there's a way of actually knitting it together into a national fabric that I think the NREN, if I look where we are in the network right now, I look into the future, and I think that the NREN will be the most secure network in the country, but also being able to provide the highest level of support and responsiveness to the connected institutions. Go on.
No, you finish.
It's just, it's easy for me to imagine that I'm saying that because I'm, the president of Canarie, that it's going to be very network centric. And I'm not saying that at all. The centricity has to be on the institutions. But let's respect the fact that, as I said during the talk, that the best way to secure yourself is to disconnect from the network. But given that you're going to be connected to Cybera or MRNet or SRNet, then you can work on both sides of that connection to make it as secure as possible for everyone. So there's actually very sound reasons why the NREN should be taking this position.
Is what's happening in Newfoundland going to happen elsewhere in Canada, i.e. the huge healthcare system hack?
Well, I mean, that would be conjecture on my part in terms of which provinces have more security in the healthcare area. I would say because it's a silent attack, I think it would raise the level of dialogue, hopefully in Newfoundland, to start to think about, hang on a second, we thought we were safe like everybody else, but in reality, we're not. And because I think we all know that governments don't always react to things that are not really visible. We live in a world where we have poor connectivity, and to solve that requires laying fiber. That there is no official ribbon cutting for, like, if you were to build a bridge. I mean, you could cut the fiber, but that would be a bad thing. So cybersecurity fits inside that same space, right? Like if you don't see it, then announcements that you're doing something about something that nobody sees is hard for politicians to get behind. At least this actually opens up a door for them to have an open dialogue around what are we truly doing as a province, but also for other provinces looking at that and saying, what are we actually doing? We thought we were secure, but if it can happen to them, it's probably going to happen to us.
What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions you see when you're going to talk to organizations and trying to convince them about this need to, pool the resources and be more open about, the issues and how we need to work together to address them?
Is this being recorded?
Yes.
I'm just joking. I think the point of the talk was really to say, our perspective at Canarie is this is primarily a federal government obligation. And there are people that would suggest that we can't rely on the federal government actually taking this seriously. And that's, I believe, is a misconception. And it's a federal government obligation simply because if you think about the Confederation or the Federation of Canada, it's a federation now because we now have a constitution. The Federation of Canada, it clearly delineates a role for the federal government to protect the country, right? We're paying taxes so that we can have a military, and yet they're out there saying, you know, we're under attack by these countries, so they're making it quite clear that they're taking this seriously. And I think that there's a misconception in the community that I've encountered that says, well, if we count on, you know, funding from the feds, what if that goes away at some point in the future? And I go, until the threat is gone, I can't imagine they're ever going to stand down, because it impacts everything that their entire responsibility, as well as the livelihood of every citizen in this country. And if they're not taking that seriously, then we got the wrong government.
I'm not sure if this was a question that you can answer, but it was said earlier in another presentation that cyber criminals follow the path of least resistance. How does this fit into what you're talking about?
That's a great question. And I think that is 100% true. Not only the path of least resistance, but the path with the highest value. So for most of you, your home computers are probably safe for now, safe from state actors, right? Why? They're not going to get a lot from hacking your computer. That doesn't mean that the thousands or tens of thousands of hackers that are just doing it for fun, that you're immune from them. But for the most part, like, it's unlikely that state actors are coming after you. Just like having a more security at your house, you can convince them to go to the next house. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we could get them to go to a different country?
Wouldn't it be nice if we could convince them not to do it at all, Jim, to turn away from their criminal ways?
Yeah, you've got to change your evil ways. The reality, you know, it's actually it's unfortunate. This is the dark side of humanity, right? I mean, we could have an entire conversation about the morality of these people.
We could get very philosophical here.
Absolutely, but understand that for the most part, I would think that they believe in what they're doing, like that you know, that Western society or some other society, that we actually deserve it. I mean, I think, you know, the mindset that they can convince themselves in, like, I'm pretty sure, for example, Bonnie and Clyde thought, well, you know what, we're doing a public service by actually robbing these banks because those rich people are exploiting I mean, you can psych yourself out into anything. So I don't know about that psyche. I just think it's a great question. Like, there's all kinds of interesting things we could talk about, Megan, and certainly it's a philosophical thing. If we were inside at the conference, we'd be having a glass of wine talking about this.
Oh yeah, I could explore this for hours. We do have another minute because Nenshi is just heading to reload his computer. So we're benefiting from that in this conversation here. But I will just ask the next question in the Q&A list. How do we protect the critical infrastructure like the network across multiple layers of government, access to funds and resources? How do we protect the critical infrastructure like the network across multiple levels of government?
That's okay. How do we do that? Exactly is that what it says? The one I see is vertical, exposed to any other vertical. Should the NRENs work at other verticals? Is that the one you're talking about?
Well, I'm in the Q&A area.
Oh, okay. I'm not looking at that one. Sorry. Right. There's people putting stuff in the chat. How do you do that? So I would say, hopefully I'm answering these questions as they.
Yeah, let's say we're talking about.
So there's three layers, right? There's a layer at the institution, there's the regional layer, and then there's the national layer. And it's our view that these things should be working together. And by working together at the regional layer, you can then go convince your provincial government to give additional funding for that region, and also advocate for additional funding and things to go to the institutions that are connected. Remember this common voice, right? And then at the federal layer, our job is to try to knit it together into a national fabric. So the structure then really emerges as a multi-layered structure: institutional, regional, federal, national. And by working together, we should be able to not only unlock funding regionally, but also through the work that the NREN is doing with this assessment tool, enable institutions to understand where they should be putting their own investments and making their own case for what they need from whomever's going to fund them. Hopefully that answered the question.
I hope so as well. Getting that clear communications across, though, is so key. Getting to the right people and explaining it to them. Another question from the Q&A. Similar to Miguel's questions, should some systems be closed systems?
Yeah, so there is work happening in the U.S. that we're looking at that actually have closed in the sense of isolated from other systems, things like DMZs and secure areas of transport, right? So there's a lot of different ways we could be imagining it. One of the challenges for the NREN is to try to do everything we're doing as transparently as possible, right? The thing about the NREN is that it just works. Well, we need to make sure that it continues to just work, and also come up with services that is being suggested here to sort of protect the users that are taking advantage of it.